Near mint condition, the home of collected editions.
That cover's so awesome.
Absolute format is the best way to own this store. Time to empty those wallets and fill those shelves. How's it going, all you mentees? Uncanny Omar here from Near Mint Condition, the home of collected editions. And Vic Sage is back. That's right. The Question Omnibus Volume 2 is finally here. So let's take a look at it together. That's right. It is finally here. One of my most anticipated Omnis, The Question Omnibus Volume 2. So let's take a closer look at it together. Here we have the logo, The Question by Dennis O'Neil and Dennis Cowan. Omnibus, the DC logo, Volume 2. The same frame, or actually, no, that is a different frame. Let me go get my book here in a second, and we'll look at it together. The Question Omnibus by Dennis O'Neil and Dennis Cowan. This picture right here from I think it's issue 34, Volume 2, the DC logo. And that's issue 35, if I'm not mistaken. He'll get to the truth or he'll die trying. The back of the book right here. And this book retailing for $125. It doesn't have a mature rating on there, but it's, well, I know all Omnis come wrapped in plastic. Actually, before we take the dust jacket off, I did want to show what it looked like next to Volume 1. So it did have a frame, but not like this one. I was mistaken. But the Question logo's up there. But more importantly, how most of us, 99% of us, unless you have unlimited amount of space, are going to put them on a shelf together. So Dennis O'Neil, Dennis Cowan, Volume 1, Volume 2. So red, or rather pink, and then the blue here. And of course, the backs of each of these books. Now let's take a look underneath the dust jacket by first looking at the flaps with this picture of Vic Sage, Dennis O'Neil, Dennis Cowan right there, just bio on the creators, and the images here by Dennis Cowan. The Question Omnibus by Dennis O'Neil, Dennis Cowan. I think this is from the Quarterly, if I'm not mistaken. All right, we're going to crack this book open, and in case you haven't read Volume 1, I may be talking about some spoilerish, minor spoilers, but I'll let you know ahead of time. All right, let's go ahead and crack this book open. Here's your end sheets and the title page, The Question Omnibus by Dennis O'Neil and Dennis Cowan, Volume 2. And over here is your table of contents and where you're going to find each of these particular stories. And in here, you're going to get the title of the story, or the chapter, or the issue, rather. And all of this, unless otherwise noted, are stories written by Dennis O'Neil, then penciled by Dennis Cowan, inked by Malcolm Jones III, colored by Tatiana Wood, and lettered by Willie Schubert. And starting it with Losing Face, all the way to Untitled. Oh, I know what that is. Okay, we'll talk about that here in a second. And kicking it off with The Question Annual number 2. So collected in here is The Question Annual number 2, as well as the rest of the issues of The Question 28 through 36. Azrael Plus number 1, Green Arrow Annual 2 and 3, Question Quarterly 1 through 5, Showcase 95 number 3, The Brave and the Bold 1 through 6, and The Question Returns number 1, as well as material from Who's Who number 12, 888 pages. And we kick it off with Annual number 2 that kind of retells his origin about the character right here. This is a crossover with Green Arrow Annual number 2, where it showcases Ollie coming from Seattle and heading over here to Hub City, where he claims that there's somebody that's committing crime wearing a faceless mask, much like the character of Vic Sage, The Question. But in here, you get to find out a little bit more in depth about his origin story. This is the story of Charles Victor Zsasz, that later was renamed to Vic Sage, and Zsasz has no connection to the supervillain, the Batman supervillain. And just in case you haven't read Volume 1 and you don't care about minor spoilers, here we go with the minor spoilers. Vic Sage is a character that was created by Steve Ditko. The Question has been around since the publication of Blue Beetle #1, which premiered in 1967, and he was a backup story, and much like all the other Charlton comics, they were acquired by DC in 1983, but wasn't really used until 1986. He showed up in Crisis, and then eventually he got his own ongoing series when he was under the DC universe. So this time around, it's all written by Dennis O'Neil and then primarily drawn by Dennis Cowan. Unless noted, like such as the case of this annual right here, annual #2 is drawn by Bill Ray. Now, I think something that I saw in my last comments, or something that I found really interesting, is that some people thought that this guy had no face, that the Question walked around with no face. And that's actually a mask that he's been wearing. It's made out of this substance called pseudoderm, and when it's exposed to certain gas, it bonds to his face and conceals his features. And that's actually what this annual does. It tells you exactly why he was trying to conceal those features to go and tell this particular story, because he was a newscaster. But it's just really cool to see Dennis O'Neil expand on this character, because as I've mentioned, I'm sure, because I don't go back and watch my videos, and I should have done it. As mentioned in the first video, without the Question, without Steve Ditko's The Question or Mr. A, there would be no Rorschach. And Rorschach, of course, is what Alan Moore was going to use. Well, he was going to use The Question, but then DC thought, we're actually going to do something with the Charlton characters. Why don't you just make those characters loosely based on the Charlton characters? And he did, and the rest was history. He deconstructed all those superheroes. But one of the things that Alan Moore did that Dennis O'Neil does a little bit different is Alan Moore, created these anti-heroes, deconstructed the whole superhero idea, and characters like Rorschach, part of their pride, part of who they were, was their undoing. Whereas here, we have this character who starts off as a really cocky bastard, gets his ass handed to him several times, including, if you remember, in the first issue, he got his butt kicked by Lady Shiva. So then he had to go and get trained by a wheelchair-bound Richard Dragon, and he recovered, got out of bed, and then got both into martial arts and the whole Eastern philosophy, returned back to Hub City, and even though he resumed his journalistic ways, he became a superhero. Or a hero, but I guess a superhero to some. And he comes with his own supporting cast, like his buddy, Professor Aristotle Rodor, that helps him out. He's kind of his Alfred, his love interest, Mira Furman. And you'll see their love expand here and where it ends up. But what I like about him is that, unlike the character of Rorschach, Dennis O'Neil is able to take this character and make him evolve, make him change. And that's one of my favorite moments that happens when he is with Green Arrow. Like, they're both sitting down and they're talking about their flaws, but how there's always a chance, how there's always a way to be a better person. They can't let their flaws and their past hold them down. You always have to have a willingness to change. And I thought that was the beauty of The Question. This ridiculous story about a guy that wears this particular mask, that gets into all these kinds of trouble, that isn't the best at what he does. He's not Batman, he's not even Rorschach, but he does evolve, and he becomes kind of a badass in his own way. So the first two stories that are collected in here are the annuals, too, that leads into Green Arrow Annual #2. Some of it taking place in Seattle and some of it taking place in Hub City, but then eventually taking place in Santa Prisca, where they're trying to stop all these drug dealers from coming into the country. And of course, it's a huge team up. And then we go to the main story arc. So kicking it off with issue #28, which sees the return of Lady Shiva, a character that has been there since issue #1, a character that kind of helped Vic Sage get reborn. And every time she appears, there's something important happening in Vic's life. Now, this is a character that has trained Batman right after he got his back broken. This is a character that kicked the crap out of Vic Sage. But this time around, when she expects to fight him and, take absolutely no time to take him down, she's shocked to find out just how much of a badass he's become. You can find out how this particular fight ends. So what Dennis O'Neil and Dennis Cowan end up doing towards the end of the run is kind of wrapping up a lot of the loose ends that they first started, starting with the return of Lady Shiva, and pretty much attempts to mediate this gang war between the Ghost and the Huns in Hub City. And then the rest of the series ends up wrapping up. So this all wrapped up in, when was it? I think it ended in like 1990. And this all has something to do with the new mayor, because you all probably remember in the first volume how corrupt the mayor was. Well, now we get a brand new mayor towards the ending of this. And it's not who a lot of people suspected it was going to be. This is one of my favorite, all-time favorite Question issues. I think this is 31. And it's where he used to live. It's now this place is about to be torn down, but him and Myra get caught up in the rubble. And I just think he delivers this beautiful speech about your past and how you're supposed to remember the past, even though it wasn't the most beautiful place, even though it was miserable. It's just the place you used to live, and it holds a special place in your heart, no matter how it looked. And there's this beautiful moment between him and Myra here where he's crying. So, tying up loose ends, and then eventually wrapping up the series, we are introduced to a new character named Jackie, who will play a big important part in the next story arc, and that is in Green Arrow Annual number 3. Now, what's really interesting about this omnibus is that the letter pages are all the way in the back. I kind of wish they were right after the issue, so I didn't have to go from here back to this and try to figure out what comic the letter pages came from. I'm just glad they collected the letter pages, and I hope this is a step in the right direction to keep collecting letter pages, because to me they're a big part of collections. They're like a time capsule. They give you an idea of what people were thinking back then. So don't expect a big team up here in the annual. This is just a Ollie and Dinah story, but Vic Sage does appear with this young little girl named Jackie. And then we kick off the series of the Quarterly. And the Quarterly is the first time I remember seeing Joe Quesada's artwork. And Quarterly takes Vic Sage completely out of Hub City and kind of into the world. For example, this one right here, this is the story that mainly takes place in the Brazilian rainforest, where Vic Sage returns to this native village, and he's looking for medicine for, what is her name? Jackie. That's right, Jacqueline. And each of these stories right here, these quarterlies, have him visiting different parts of the world. So it's kind of like him going on world tour. This right here, I want to say, is the first Joe Quesada issue that I remember. Is this issue number 3? Yeah. So this has internal artwork in here by Joe Quesada. I think the layouts are still Dennis Cowan, if I'm not mistaken. This is long before he was doing Ray, or he was doing Azrael. Or sort of Azrael, rather. Or Ninjak. Then, of course, went on to Marvel with X-Factor, but it's what it looked like. And you can definitely tell the difference between him and, Dennis Cowan. Dennis Cowan has a very unique style. Some people would say it's rough around the edges, but I love it. I think it fits the tone of this particular story, especially the way that Dennis O'Neil writes the character of the Question. Now, he does a couple of issues. I think he does this issue too. Yeah, there's a little bit of Joe Quesada. It's just really interesting to see him evolve as an artist, but that is totally still a Joe Quesada pose, and the way that the contrast works, and the way he draws buildings and the angles. But Dennis Cowan still had his own unique style. Absolutely loved it. So after the Quarterly ends, there is the Brave and the Bold. These are all written by Mike Grell, so I'm really impressed that they decided to collect it in here, because neither Dennis Cowan nor Dennis O'Neil worked on the Brave and the Bold. But this showcases the team up with, again, Green Arrow. There's a couple of other characters that helped them along the way, and it's kind of like your team-up book. DC has been doing Brave and the Bold for ages, and they keep bringing it back. I think at one time, in the early aughts, Mark Waid was writing stories for the Brave and the Bold. So I'm sorry, it's not just Mike Grell, but it's also Mike Barron with Shea Anton Pensa doing the artwork. and it's the first 6 issues that teams up. It's one continuing story, but it does team up Vic Sage with the character of Green Arrow. And there's a little backup story right here, Homecoming, which is written by Dennis O'Neil and Rick Burchett, drawing these particular issues right here, where the character of Vic Sage ends up going home. Because remember, he was an orphan. This is the Azrael Plus story, where there is a team-up with Azrael, written by Dennis O'Neil, who was writing the series at the time. And it ends with The Question Returns. And this is Dennis O'Neil and Eduardo Barreto doing this artwork. This all takes place in the 90s and wraps up some of the things that happened in the 80s. 88, 89, those particular stories. Because one thing about Dennis O'Neil, even though he tried to tie up a lot of the loose ends, sometimes he would leave a couple of plot holes just dangling there and weren't really resolved. And that's kind of what, actually, that wraps up the series, and then we get the letter pages. And that, the way it ends, oh my gosh. Not the way that I wanted it to go, but it is the only way that the question would have ended. In the back, you do get the who's who. So not just the question, but also his supporting cast. Forgot to talk about Isidore O'Toole, who's the corrupt cop of Hub City. You know, honestly, what I wish they would have collected in here was also the question number 37, which is part of the Blackest Night tie-in, but that one was written by Dennis O'Neil. Or I wish they would have collected the Batman Huntress Cry for Blood issues, the first 6 issues. Oh, Steel 38, that actually featured a question, but it's drawn by Dennis Cowan. It's not written by Dennis O'Neil. Wish they would have collected those. But honestly, the mapping in this is perfect. I love the fact that they included the letter pages. Now let's talk about the binding and build. 888 pages, not much of an eye, and I have stretched the spine a couple times, but it does lay over rather well, so there's very minimal gutter loss. Now, as far as the paper stock, it is using this new, almost like satin type of paper, not really semi-gloss, not really matte paper, but it is different than the paper stock that they used in the first volume here. So the first volume over here has this... It does have like a thick, glossy finish to it, whereas this one doesn't feel like that high gloss finish to it. And honestly, it's just something that some people may notice. I think most people are like, whatever. Mature content due to the violence and some of the nudity, much like the first book. But oh my gosh, story so ahead of its time. I never thought we would have the series collected in omnibus format, but here we are. And I can't wait for stories like Hitman to be collected like this. That, as they say, is that. If you're interested in purchasing this omnibus, don't forget to check out our sponsors.
If you're in Europe and you're interested in buying these books, definitely check out Walt's Comic Shop in Berlin, Germany. They have the cheapest pre-order prices, flat shipping rate of €12 for all EU countries, emails answered within 24 hours, waltscomicshop.com, and you can use the code nearmintcondition at checkout and get free shipping for all EU countries with your first order over €40. That's Walt's Comic Shop, your reliable source for omnis and premium collected editions in Europe. Ding!
CheapGraphicNovels.com, your online home for graphic novels and collected editions up to 50% off cover price. They have excellent shipping and prompt and helpful service. Check out their bargain deals for up to 90% off cover price. And don't forget that CGN also takes pre-orders. That way you don't miss out on the hottest releases. And they are currently running a special promotion for you Minties. If you're a first-time customer, after receiving your order confirmation email, reply back to that email and let them know Near Mint Condition sent you their way. They will then apply a free shipping promotional credit to your next order in the US. Cheap Graphic Novels, your source for the hottest books with the kind of deep discount, quality shipping, and customer service that will keep you coming back for more. And that was the content, the page count, and build of this book. Let me know in the comments down below if you are picking it up, if you remember all of these stories, you have the trade paperbacks, if you have the single issues, and what else you would love to see collected with the question. Would you like to see the Renee Montoya era or not? I think it would be a really cool omnibus, especially those Greg Rucka issues. Anyway, if you have any questions, leave them down below. Don't forget to smash that like button. That's it, everybody. Stay healthy and safe out there. Much love.